I'm Tom Landon. Join me as we learn what it takes to be a street performer and for communities to embrace them. Welcome. Have you ever watched a street performance of tumblers or a magician and wondered what goes into the performance and also what rules a city might have in place for them? I have, and my guests are here to share their insights, as well as how communities can promote these impromptu cultural experiences while also ensuring public safety and limited disruptions for those who might be impacted by the crowds that gather. Jefferson Rose, aka Magnificent Lefty, is both a performer and an advocate for buskers, and Ryan Lafountain is Roanoke's Commissioner of the Revenue. Together, they're working to make Roanoke more hospitable to buskers while making sure that performers remain in compliance with local ordinances. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for having me.
And Jefferson, you are our resident busker, so I'm just going to start with you and ask, what got you into this in the first place, and what how'd you kind of end up in this position?
Oh, thank you. So on my 10th birthday, I went to a Renaissance fair in Maryland and saw sword swallowers and jugglers, and saw they were bringing people together in a space that they really didn't know what they were going to see, but they all left happy, even in the heat of a late September Mid-Atlantic festival, which can be a little bit muggy, but they were all very happy. I decided that day that that's what I wanted to do. I've been through a lot of different jobs through the years trying to figure out how to get it going full time, and when I found Roanoke and I moved here and the downtown spaces that are available here for me to work, I decided to stay. And I've built a culture of it for 4 years now, and it's my full-time job now. Really happy with that.
And one of the reasons we're here today is the day we're taping this is just a couple days before a big event that you all are having downtown. And I know, Ryan, you and your office are helping with that. But when someone comes to you and asks for some help with street performance, what is there in your background that made you say yes to that?
So the Office of the Commissioner of the Revenue, what my office does, we primarily handle taxation, but business licensing is a big part of that, and we integrate with a lot of city departments to help guide people in the right direction to get the proper permits and then come back and get the business license issued. My background prior to serving in the Commissioner's office is with credit unions. For nearly 15 years, I worked in multiple credit unions, including a few in the Roanoke area, and that really fed my need to serve the public. And when I chose to run for Commissioner of the Revenue, I wanted to continue that service to the public in this community that I love. And then seeing this opportunity come up with Jefferson is another opportunity to help engage people who want to thrive creatively, making their own business in the form of the performing arts and sharing their talents with the public.
Sure. And, as a creative, as we get called often, right?
Right.
I don't know whether you feel comfortable talking about, business and taxes and that sort of thing. It's probably not what you got into this to talk about, right?
I'm getting more and more comfortable with it with the help of people like Ryan and the office that he runs so great downtown. And honestly, as a street performer, you're First Amendment protected to do your show in a public space. You don't need one. But the help and getting, so if you get a gig booked off of what you've done on the street and someone wants to bring you to a party or an event at a gala or something like that to play violin, for example, to cash that check, you will need a business license. So creating that bridge for those important opportunities is a really cool part of this.
I imagine that busking is a largely cash-based job when you're doing it in the street, right? Are there special things that street performers need to be aware of on that end, or is that something we don't worry about so much?
Well, so long as they're complying with any laws that the city or the Commonwealth have regarding conducting business and receiving funds in compensation for business, we want to make sure that that's being followed. And of course, it's a cash-driven business. You're expected to be honest when you file your tax returns. That's just kind of a basic thing that makes ideally society run, but right. that could be a whole discourse for something else. We're here to serve as a resource fundamentally and to help people succeed at what they're attempting to do.
No, I think it's great. You know, we don't actually often, the commissioners of the revenue of Virginia tend to be people that we really only see or hear about them come election time. It's nice to hear about that. I want to back up a little bit, though. Jefferson, I'm using this term busking. That's may not be a familiar term to everybody. What goes into it? What's kind of the history of it from your perspective?
Sure. Busking, the word itself, comes from a Middle English variation of basking, because we work out basking in the sun. So it's any kind of street performance or of any art form out in a public space. Generally, because there's no venue to sell tickets or anything like that, the way that lifestyle and performance is able to run is through tips and donations from the community or tourists. And as far as I'm concerned or understand, it is one of the most ancient traditions and ways to work and ways to contribute to a community that we have. It can go all the way back to the one good storytelling caveman around the fire was in a way busking. And that's just something I'm proud to carry on. It goes back older than Shakespeare bringing theater inside. It goes back older than getting ripped off by certain ticket monopolies and convenience fees. It's a democratic form of entertainment. At the end of the show, you get to decide what it's worth. I've already done the whole show. I've already played the whole song and dance. It's up to you. Is it worth $5? Are you and your date walking down the street holding hands a little bit tighter? That might be worth $5 to you. If you're with a group or your family and want to put $10 in the hat, that's great. If you had a life-changing experience that encourages you to ask for a promotion or do something that you've always wanted to do for yourself. I've had a woman come up to me after the show and say that she'd been practicing violin for 10 years in secret and didn't even know her kids and husband know that she was doing it. But after watching my show, she was encouraged to do it at her next family reunion. And if you get a life-changing experience like that, I definitely think that's worth a 20.
Sure.
And if you didn't like the show, you can still give me a 20. There's no reason we should both be disappointed.
Right. And you know, Ryan, this is more asking you from a personal perspective than the city's role. You've explained what the city's role, and I think that's all fantastic. But, you know, again, you're helping out a group of people that you know, your office doesn't have to help out. What was it about the idea of seeing street performers in Roanoke that kind of made your ears prick up a little bit?
Sure. So I've seen Jefferson perform on the street for 4 years now. It's
Very, very close to 4.5 at this point.
Yeah. And I mean, I was impressed the first time that I saw him do Bet of Nails act, I think was the first thing that really jumped out to me. And he's very engaging with the audience. And it's, you know, you think of a larger city where you will have performers and buskers who will do stuff like that. It's not really a thing that you see in Roanoke, but it's something that adds value to where we live, and what we have as a place. And to me personally, that's very important. You know, this city is made of all sorts. And to encourage that, to be able to encourage that, just feels very enriching. And to be able to share this talent and to enable people to share what they're good at, and again, what their creativeness, you know, if there's anything I can do personally, on a personal level, to assist that, I mean, I think that just makes our city a better place.
Jefferson, you mentioned that for the upcoming event that we'll have footage of going over this, that it'll take place on the Roanoke City Market. When you talked about coming here and seeing that city market.
Yeah.
Did some bells go off in your mind, just like, oh, this is a place that's perfectly made for this?
It's actually really interesting that you say that, because I recently found out in the history of researching this project and who originally laid out the foot traffic map that became the historic district of downtown Roanoke. Mr. James Nolan is actually responsible for the same kind of city planning in places like St. Petersburg, Florida, where I also work, and so many other pitches. Pitches is the place where we work. I tend to slide into our lingo. Yeah, I tend to slide into our lingo, and I'll try to catch myself. But the pitch or the stage where we work is his fingerprints are over all of them. And I didn't realize that he had built out the little grassy plaza next to the Wells Fargo Tower is named after him. So it's kind of interesting that I had the idea to perform here after realizing that all of those more established places where we work were designed by, in many cases, the same individual.
Right. And the, so you, as a performer, do you travel in order to make sure that you can make a living doing what you're doing?
Sure. So especially as a magician, if you've seen my show, unless I write new material and introduce new acts, all the surprises are gone. So I frequently, and more often than a juggler or a musician might have to, I have to pick up and move and go find a new audience frequently. So in the last 4 years, since I was able to go full time with this job, I've traveled to 60 different cities. Whether that's a farmer's market in a suburb outside of the same city I'm at this weekend or whatever it is, 60 different locations. And I have taken that time for the last 4 years to think about how the different models of foot traffic, parking management, how farmers markets are run and how they look, and how all of these things on small scale levels, and how schedules are run by street performers when they democratically get together and draw keys stamped with numbers from buckets. Or if you show up to a queue with a laminated poster and write your name on for the 10 o'clock slot, whatever it is. How all these different systems work, and I've taken piecemeal of each of them considering Roanoke and tried to build my own model of how I think it would work best. The workshop on Friday is going to start a conversation with local performance artists who will be able to keep the tradition up when I go on tour, and they'll keep it running, even as hobbyists and weekenders. So it's going to be a community effort to see how that model actually works. Because I'm not right about it. This is the first time it's been done here. And as far as being as engaged as warmly by a city as it has been, might be the first time it's been done anywhere. So it's a really cool project, and I'm excited to see how this model works.
Tell me about the workshop itself that, again, will have already happened by the time you see this video. But Ryan, you mentioned that you're going to be there just as one of many, I guess, to talk about, what do you think it's most important that folks who are in these creative businesses like busking, and maybe particular to busking, what do they have to know to keep themselves out of trouble when they roll into a new town?
Well, yeah. So the important thing is, as Jefferson mentioned, there are rights that performers have when they're busking out in public, and certainly we want to establish that those rights exist, but that when you're, again, conducting business, there are certain responsibilities that you have, depending on what you're doing. Of course, if you're doing a fire performance, you get with fire marshal, make sure everything's clear there. But helping people navigate what bureaucracy there is and that we have, and to be a good resource, that's really what we're here for. And what's the purpose of being part of the presentation on Friday is to help educate people on what that process can look like, how the Commissioner of the Revenue's office can be part of that process, and then also just educating on the tax side where our office is housed effectively.
Yeah, sure. And what are some of the other things people will learn at the workshop if those local performers come?
So a lot of what we've talked about that is done with fire marshal permits and insurance that I would require for anyone doing a danger act like I do to have.
Right. If you're going to be laying on a bed of nails.
If you're playing banjo, I'm not too worried about it. Right. But if you're going to do any kind of fire or bed of nails or machete juggling like I do, there are insurance companies that you should have certificates of insurance with. And so I'm going to provide all of the links to those companies and all of that, the resource numbers to how to get the information on what should be acceptable in what places. Also providing just locations and resources with local police for safety issues and all that. But a lot of that coincides with how busking best works. So it's mostly going to be a culture and etiquette introduction. So if you're playing guitar, don't have your amplifier turned up so loud that you're rattling the teeth of the people in the gift shop behind you. If you're doing a large-scale circle show like I do, you want to make sure to leave enough, bring your audience in, invite them to come stand closer together, to leave crosswalks available for people who use wheelchairs or any of those considerations. You want to make sure that you're a feature and not an obstruction. And that's the most important part, is making sure that getting on the ground floor with this. Everyone who's never tried it before and wants to try street perform, every Roanoker who wants to try street performing for the first time, or any veteran street performer who comes in wanting to try Roanoke for the first time, understands that we're all on the same page to create an environment where we're all features and not obstructions.
Right. I'm curious, just because I have been curious in places where I've seen street performers before. I'm thinking especially of like Key West at Sunset and places like that where it's a really big deal. What's the kind of hierarchy for deciding who gets the good spot and who is off to the side and who gets how much time? I've just always, I know any profession, any activity has some sort of organic organization behind it, but how does it work for you all?
Sure. So in Key West in particular, there's a system of, it has a little bit of inside baseball, but that pitch was established by someone who street performers have a lot of respect for, named Will Soto, and he performed there for 49 years before retiring this last year. And he's just widely respected in the community for being the person to discover Mallory Square in Key West and building it into a place where it's a international tourist destination driven by street performers,
right?
Which is something that, as long as Key West is going to continue to run, is beautiful. That also happens in Montreal and Quebec City and Boston. So there's a circuit that runs from South Florida to New England and Eastern Canada, right past Roanoke, on the halfway mark, which is why I live here, so that I'm a 13-hour drive both directions from those really good places to work. I want to create a stopover point where these international acts going to these well-established pitches can go to Roanoke on the weekend between, when they're when they're going up
much
spring
like
to fall.
we get a lot of really good musical acts on Wednesday and Thursday nights because they're on their way between Nashville and New York.
Exactly. It's the same stopover pattern. It's just different destinations. You're exactly right. So having a Wednesday, Thursday kind of, this will eventually develop that kind of pattern to it. As far as like the hierarchy of how it goes, there's always going to be a certain level of seniority in any kind of democratic thing, because frankly, I spent 4 years coming out in the rain, coming out when no one was out, coming out when everyone was out, coming out when people didn't understand what I was doing yet and thought I was an inconvenience and in the way. And now it's great. I have not had a weekend this season yet where a farmer's market vendor hasn't personally thanked me for being there. Sometimes they tip me just for showing up. Sometimes they give me a gift of some of their beautiful, wonderful cupcakes or whatever they have. And it's been every week this year. So it feels really good to be accepted.
I guess the idea is like this becomes an amenity, right? This is something that, and you're someone who, in all of your roles, I know that you are a fan of Roanoke. You moved here from away. And, what does it mean, again, from your personal or professional perspective, to think about developing a new scene here?
Yeah, I think the opportunity to develop a new, I say new, I don't think new is the right word, but to expand upon the art scene, the creative scene that's here, with the existing talent that we have in the form of Jefferson Rose and the other people who are interested in street performance, that provides, if we're able to grow that and, again, enable these people to, these artists to thrive and succeed at what they're attempting to do, I think that's more than an amenity at that point. It becomes, art shouldn't just be I'm blanking on the word that I want. Art isn't an option to me because it's intrinsic to life. Art is a necessity. So I don't like to call it an amenity. It's a thing that is necessary to exist in any community that helps make it a vibrant place.
Sure.
And, having this community be developed within our community, I think is just wonderful, from a personal perspective.
Sure. If Jefferson, you talk about, you've been here and you've been thinking about it a lot in the course of your last 4 years here. Are there other folks who are also, professional buskers in our region, or are you kind of a unicorn here?
That's one of the reasons I've been excited to start this, is because one of my favorite parts of my job is hanging out on the side between shows while one of our friends is up. And then we get to watch and critique and have fun after the day is over. Oh, I saw this happened with this so-and-so. And I don't get that a lot here because I am the only one. So by inviting, as Ryan said, all of these established local artists who often play in bars or restaurants or breweries or private events to come out and learn how to share it in a more open space. I'm going to create the community that I miss when I come out here on weekends, that I love so much in places like New Orleans or Kansas City when I go there, because that is the big fun part of being part of that little community that not everyone understands. It's an island of misfit toys, yeah.
Right. And so let's say I also, this is not true, but let's say I've always wanted to be a street performer. Who knows? Maybe there's something in me that I've been waiting to do.
Sure.
What are the things you start with when you start talking, when somebody comes to you and says, oh gosh, aren't you scared? Or are you worried what people are going to think? What do you tell new street performers when they're first expressing an interest?
It is simultaneously the most freeing and can be the most difficult venue to work. It's not like having a theater and a green room and a parking space to load in your stuff. Like you show up and you are carrying your equipment from whatever parking space you could find, sometimes a half mile away, to go to this spot, and the weather could break as soon as you get a nice crowd together and rain you out. Like, there's no guarantees, but that's also the fun part, because you get to have really cool days where someone catches the end of my magic show and his partner really enjoys it, and he circles back around with a little ring box and says, I've had this. And if there's a way that you could gather a crowd together and do your show and take a little break so that I can propose, I've been trying to figure out the moment, this is the moment. When you can provide that moment for somebody else, and it's only happened to me once, that one, it's a really special, cool thing.
Right. And the other question I have, I was recently in a big international city where there were street performers, amazing gymnasts. I mean, and they were from another country, clearly from the immigrant community. They were really remarkable, but there was a point where they overstayed their welcome.
Sure.
We were having lunch, they were loud, it was great, and then it got really intrusive, and the management of the restaurant actually had to intervene. And nobody was comfortable. It made everybody comfortable. I mean, is there advice for people, like, how do you read the crowd to know, like, this is good, we're good?
Sure.
Or maybe it's time to see if we can get some money and move on.
Right. So I'm suggesting in this program, as part of my model for how that works, because I know what it's like when I've done my third show and you're hearing the same jokes and the same lines, and you're at a restaurant patio and it's like, this guy again. I'm suggesting that the system we're going to have in Roanoke in particular assigns like 2-hour blocks drawn from a bucket on rotation, so that it helps feed that variety, so that kind of thing you're saying doesn't happen. As much as I get annoyed saying the same thing over and over again, I don't want to annoy you with it.
What? Or we don't want people accosting people like Elmo on Times Square, right?
There are those problems, and those problems I am prepared to handle personally, because I understand that I am taking a beautiful downtown space and opening it up to a wide variety of eccentric, creative people. And the vast majority of them are awesome and good friends of mine who've already been here from London, from Sydney, from Berlin, from New Orleans. And that's a great tight-knit community. Are there bad apples in my line of work? Absolutely. Sure. It's going to be my job to make sure that those get massaged out and moved down, run out on a rail as quickly as possible.
Right. We've still got a couple minutes left. I don't want to ask too much about this, but like, we're here with the Commissioner of Revenue, and I'm thinking a little bit about finances, and like, can you make a living doing this, or do most people have to do other things in order to live this life?
If you're really good at it, you can make a living at it, and then there are people who reinvest that into other businesses that if they're a contortionist and they hit their 40s and they can't necessarily do contortion anymore, they might start moving into another thing, but still do this because they love it, even though they don't need to. It's not like having a paycheck to paycheck job at that point. You can still do it for the passion of it whenever you feel good about it. And so that's, a lot of us do that. A lot of us end up investing back in the communities that built us, and starting businesses. Some of us own CrossFit gyms. Some of us own breweries that become popular in Western Canada. A buddy of mine does that. And it's great to see over time that community investment in my art form come back in my later years as community investment in another business that employs other people and does all the wonderful revenue things we talked about.
Ryan, any thoughts on what your hopes are for this coming workshop?
Well, I hope that we are able to help people become more educated, at least on our side, and of course with what Jeff's doing to get them on track to succeed at what they want to do. That's the big goal, and that's all that I personally and I professionally want to see.
Well, I just want to thank you guys. It is all the time we have. I want to thank my guests for sharing their insights. I really look forward to watching as Roanoke starts to embrace buskers. For What It Takes, I'm Tom Landon.